This is a UDL in Action podcast. Episode 2, Grassroots Questions, Shifting Practice Through UDL. UDL in Action podcast wishes to acknowledge First Nations peoples in Australia and across the world whose songlines traverse the globe. We pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, whose cultural traditions inspire and continue to educate.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the UDL in Action podcast, where we talk inclusion, innovation, and the everyday impact of universal design for learning in real classrooms. I'm your host, Rebecca Rosenberg, and it's great to have you with us for episode 2. In this podcast, we're doing something a little different. Rather than diving straight into the UDL theory, we're opening up the conversation to questions from educators on the ground, people doing the work, navigating the challenges, and wanting to create inclusive classrooms for every learner. And joining me again is someone who brings deep insight and grounded strategies to these conversations. My co-host, Rhonda Laswell from Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation in Indiana. Rhonda, welcome back.
It's so good to be here, and I'm super excited to hear what the questions are this time.
Fantastic. Well, it's from this point that I ask today's questions, which come from Annie, a brilliant specialist working in education who's asking the kinds of questions that signal real change is possible. So here's Annie's first question, Rhonda. How can we shift teachers' perspectives on classroom practice through a universal design for learning lens to foster more varied and child-centered learning environments?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think that when we approach the child-centered piece of that, we have to look at gradual release, and that's for the teacher and the student. You know, what I'm doing in my classroom in August is not going to be exactly the same thing that I'm doing in January, or it shouldn't be that I'm doing in May. Throughout the course of a school year, as the community of learners is created, and we're doing more student-directed work, we should see students more in the learning driver's seat, so to speak. So when we look at that through the UDL lens, when we look at the guidelines, what we're looking at is kind of an entry point on that top line, and then more interaction with the student, and then more student-centered as we proceed through the guidelines, so that we're getting to a point where a student is actually utilizing executive functioning skills that we foster, that we support, that we scaffold throughout the course of a school year. And I can just give you a small example.
Yes.
So when I begin direct instruction at the beginning of the school year, when I taught 7th grade science, I gave a very structured note-taking guide. As the school year went on, I pulled more and more off of that during the direct instruction time, and students were responsible for more on their end, so to speak. But you know what? A scaffold is great anytime for a kiddo who, for example, isn't feeling well that day, or for a student who forgot their glasses and can't see up on the projector or the LCD screen. So it's always important to remember that we don't ever take all of that away, because we want to be sure that we're supporting kiddos throughout the course of the learning process. So it's not just about content or skill. It's really also about teaching students how to learn.
Yeah, fantastic. And so just to reiterate, your school year starts in August. Our school year starts in January. So, so you're basically saying what you're implementing in January, the amount of content or the amount of scaffolding is more intense or more detailed than what you would implement, say, for us in halfway through the year, towards the beginning of semester 2, though. Beginning of semester 2.
Yeah, and that whole gradual release process, it really supports the students moving into the driver's seat of learning. And
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
good for somebody who's just beginning to really look at the UDL lens and framework for designing and delivering instruction. But
Yeah.
it's also just good for students in general to use that gradual release process, because you're always going to have kiddos that are going to need, each school year, are going to need some of that help and support.
Yeah.
The beauty of it, though, is when you have a school district who is implementing UDL
Yes.
K through 12.
Yes.
And so implementing these things becomes easier and easier over time because students are experiencing this on a regular basis.
Oh, fantastic. Of course, of course. There's nothing like that consistency of approach. Well, looking forward to seeing that space. And did you have a template or anything like that that you used to use specifically to guide teachers in that approach?
Yeah, so what I did originally when I moved into the role of UDL coordinator is I took all the checkpoints off of, they've done that now.
Yes.
They have the one without the checkpoints, it just has the guidelines. I took those off. And then what I would have teachers do is just pencil in
Okay.
anything that you think you're doing underneath these and look at them and then see how you can add to them, how
Mm,
you can modify them, or do you have a spot that's missing? Like, I'm really not doing anything here. What can I do to help support students in this area?
yeah.
And so, for example, if you're looking at the collaboration, right, and the under engagement, where we're talking about students working with um, independently with a partner and in small groups and then large group instruction, you might see, wow, I'm doing all large group instruction. I'm doing very little partner or small group. That's
Right.
something I could add.
Yep. Fantastic.
So
Fantastic.
it
It
was a way to
helps.
guide, but it was
Yes.
also a way to kind of edit and examine my own practice.
Yeah. Great. Great. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And here's Annie's second question. How can we encourage teachers to advocate to middle management for support to implement diverse UDL informed teaching practices?
Hmm. Well, I would say to begin with, if we have someone who is truly designing and delivering instruction
Mm,
through the UDL lens, we've got engagement taking place. We've got students on task. We've got student-led, student-driven goals, and
yes.
we're going to have less behavior issues. And I think
Mm,
any school that's collecting data on office referrals and behavior issues is
yes.
going to see that teachers that are really utilizing universal design for learning are not going to have the office referrals and the behavior issues.
Yeah.
And I think anybody could put that to the test any day of the week. That was my experience when I was in the classroom as well. I think that right there is the proofs in the pudding.
Yes.
The other piece to that is yes, support is good for certain resources, but there's so much that you can do on your own without even investing in that, unless you're just advocating for that for a grade level or for a building in general. But
Mm,
there's so much a teacher can do on their own
yep.
that really won't need that. I think I would do it and then use the data. The other thing that you're going to see too is that, I mean, not that standardized test scores are how I think we should be measuring our students,
Not at
um,
all.
right? But I do think that an individual who's really, really leaning into universal design, those students are self-directed.
Yeah.
They are in charge of their own learning. And when it comes to them being able to tackle and handle content on a standardized test, they're also going to have higher test scores.
Yes, fantastic. So you're stating in summary that basically the results of not only behavioral, a student behavior, but also their academic, basically the social emotional and
Absolutely.
the academic shift is data that you can present to middle management as a tool to advocate for implementing UDL on a wider uh, at a wider level.
Yeah, as an executive functioning skills, a student's
Yeah.
ability to be flexible and
Mm,
to even want to face a challenge and not shut down, those things that they're excited about learning. And I think too, even I had the great pleasure of having you come and visit. And I think one of the things you noticed with our classrooms was the level of student directed instruction, but engagement. I think that is what really stood out.
It was amazing. Student agency was
Yes.
amazing. And the environments were so calm. And, you know, yeah, I could have thought, oh, this might have just been for this classroom or this classroom, but it was consistent from little people, from prep, which is our youngest, our earliest year level, right through to year 12. It was, and even the hallways. It was quite a privilege it was a privilege to observe, and hence why our passion to want to share what I learned over there in this podcast.
And what middle management person would not want less behavior issues and higher test scores?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much. Okay, now question number 3. How can we support teacher aides to work more intuitively with students, guided by universal design for learning, so the focus is on the child, not just ticking off curriculum tasks?
Oh, that's a great one. And in my experience as a UDL coordinator for the district, the number one thing is that you have to provide professional development for
Okay.
your support staff just as much as you do your certified staff. The other thing that's really, really important is that you universally design the professional development. Teachers need to be immersed, and support staff need to be immersed.
Yes.
And I have a perfect example of this. At the beginning of the school year, I had one individual who asked me to do PD with her staff at the beginning of every school year on universal design for learning. And because it was support staff, there was some turnover there. So, I mean, I had some people that had been before, but a large percentage of the individuals were new.
Yes.
And so when I would do the professional development on universal design for learning, and I'd say I was showing a video clip, I would give them a transcript, I would give them a summary, I would turn on the closed captioning, and then I would give them the option, right, to use a note-taking guide or not. And then I would give them private think time, and then I would let them have discussions. And then after that, what I would do is I would point out on the guidelines where we were supporting UDL by what they were doing in their learning experience. And then I would just say, hey, who here really liked the transcript? Why did you like the transcript? And someone would say, well, I can look at it on the screen and listen to it. But for me, looking at this transcript and having a highlighter, I remember it better. And I had other people who would just look at the screen and not take any notes. And I'd say, well, why do you find that beneficial? Yeah. And so after we heard from about 5 different people, I'd say, now do you understand why your students, they have different preferences. And if we're not providing them with this choice, we're going to have behavior issues. We're going to have people off task, and we're going to have people who aren't engaged. And it was like light bulbs would go off because they actually got to experience scaffolding, support, option, and choice. And when they get to experience that, they no longer have to be convinced that students need choice.
Fantastic. So basically, you modeled the framework first, and they
Absolutely
experience what it was like to be on the receiving end of this inclusive educational frameworks approach. And in response, they then took that and implemented it when working with students. Fantastic. Did any of those teacher aides actually give you feedback into the shift in their practice when working with students?
Well, I will tell you what a lot of them would come say to me at another time, or they would catch me. Most of them had kids in school, which is why they wanted to be support staff. They wanted to be on their kids' schedule. And they would say, oh my goodness, you can't believe how this has changed doing homework at home. You can't believe how this has changed how I address my own child when it comes to schoolwork and education. And so from them, most of the conversations went directly to their own children and things that they were doing differently. And I thought, you know what, that is so cool and inspiring to hear, because now they are actually living it. They're not just
Yeah.
doing it, but they're
Yes.
living it.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's beneficial for more than it's beneficial beyond the classroom, beyond the
Oh,
school,
absolutely.
and into that person's life. That's wonderful. That's great. That's great. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Beautifully said. A big thank you to Annie for her thoughtful questions today as
Yes.
well. And to all of you listening, thank you for continuing this journey with us. If today's episode sparked an idea or a question of your own, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at udl.in.action.podcast@gmail.com. Show notes and resources are also available to you simply by sending us an email, and we will get back to you in no time at all. Until next time, though, keep designing for possibility, not predictability. This has been the UDL in Action podcast. Subscribe, share, and keep the conversation going. We'll see you next time.
Toodaloo.
Bye.